Well, welcome everybody to season 3 of Your Spiritual Journey. This is the place and the space where we get real. And today is a pretty special day because I'm not the one who's going to be asking the questions.
I am.
So I should introduce our guest host. This is Adam Dove, happens to be my son. So this was his suggestion that you get to know me a little better. So here we go.
I just figured, you spent 2 whole seasons now getting to know other people and introducing them to your audience, but never really covered your spiritual journey. So it seems, season 3, it's time.
Well, I sort of leaked out a little bit about myself here and
Sure,
there,
sure.
but
Just enough
okay.
to whet people's appetites. But now the delivery. Okay. Well, I guess we can just get started then.
All right.
I guess I can introduce myself a little bit. Hi, I'm Adam Dove. I am the son of Dr. Bob Dove. I have, over the last 31 years, watched the evolution of his spiritual journey. And so the questions I'm going to ask you today, I know the answers to probably about half of them, but the other half I definitely don't, and am curious myself. So this is mildly selfish, but where we begin, probably the best place to start is at the end. So, if you could give me sort of a quick 3 sentence description of where you are now in your spiritual journey, what that looks like right now.
All right. Well, 3 sentences would probably be impossible, uh, but I'll give it a shot. I have to say, my response to many people who say, "Well, how are you doing?" And my response is, "I'm living my best life right now." Uh, so that's sort of a capsule version of
Mm-hmm.
where I am right now.
Well, you got 2 more sentences.
But it's quite a comfort zone in feeling that I'm on track. Uh, and I guess you might say on track to where or to what? Well, uh, on track in terms of an ascension process.
Mm.
Uh, and that ascension process has to do with becoming a living light body.
Okay.
And what that is about is becoming spiritually to the point where this body really doesn't matter to me at all,
Mm-hmm.
where my energy level is at such a height and such a vibration uh, that what I'm in touch with is what some people call God or the creator or spirit, and that I feel like I'm in alignment with the will of spirit. So,
Okay. All right.
if that makes sense to you,
Well,
that's where I am.
I think there are some familiar concepts in there, but we will see jumping back now to the very beginning. We'll track the evolution there to see how we got there. So, to jump all the way back, I want to start by talking about your house growing up, and your family. So, what would you say was the role of spirituality in your house growing up? I assume it didn't have anything to do with what you just said.
That is true. And it also, spirituality actually did not play a role,
Mm.
except in that my stepmother, uh, and it's kind of jumping ahead to where I have a stepmother, she was very much into Edgar Cayce.
Mm.
So I was introduced to Edgar Cayce at a young age, and had a sense that there was a spirituality out there that was not connected to any church or denomination.
Hmm. That I did not know that Edgar Casey came into your life that early.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And for the listeners, I know there's been a bit of ARE talk here on the podcast already, but do you want to explain Edgar Casey a little bit?
Well, he was known as the sleeping prophet. He would go into a trance-like state, and he would be able to diagnose people's illnesses, and often doctors would send patients to him when they had given up on finding a cure or
Mhm.
being able to even diagnose what the situation was.
Hmm.
And Casey found out about this being within him when he was a child, and had a situation where the doctors couldn't figure out why he couldn't speak. And he was able to diagnose it himself and prescribe a cure and cure himself. And there were other indications early on where he was not a good student in school, but then found that by sleeping with the book under his pillow at night, he would know everything that was in that book the next day.
A bit of spiritual osmosis.
Yeah. So he had some talents that he discovered early on. And as this became known and people started coming to him, and he kept helping people, then there was a cadre of followers who eventually helped establish the ARE at Virginia Beach.
Mm-hmm.
But there are 14,000 recorded episodes where he would find out solutions and answers, not only to medical situations, although that was the bulk of these readings, but then they went elsewhere, including into the field of reincarnation and spirituality and ancient cultures, because people would begin to ask him all kinds of questions and take him other places. So,
and he was doing all this sort of under the umbrella of the Christian God, or was this him alone? Or
well, he was an early Presbyterian who taught Sunday school. So there were some things from the readings that disturbed him because he never remembered what came out.
Oh,
these were recorded, and then people would let him know, and the person who recorded it would let him know what he had said, and sometimes he would just be shocked. Anyway, there's I don't want to go on and on about Casey, because that
this is about Casey. This is about you. If you want to know more about Edgar Casey, the internet is a great and vast resource for many things.
And my website will have a reference to it.
Yes, yourspiritualjourneypodcast.com. Right? I got that right?
Right. You got that right.
Okay, so winding it back, your stepmother introduced you to Edgar Casey. Was that intentional? Was that sort of a part of your household, or was that just sort of, she was into it and then you sort of heard about it by accident?
Yeah, the latter.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there was no sort of spiritual teaching going on in your house.
But then in college, I ended up dating somebody who took me to some study group meetings where they were studying the work of Edgar Casey.
Oh, okay.
So then I had a second influence that said, oh, this may be something worth exploring.
Okay. So then in your home growing up, if there was no sort of direct spiritual teaching going on, let's say from, 0 to 18, where did your spiritual inclinations sit? What were you thinking about spirituality then?
Well, there were a couple things. When it came to church, church was a place for the parents to drop us off. So
Daycare.
church was daycare and
Mhm.
babysitting, so that they could have some time alone.
Mm.
Uh, but those Sunday school classes, those lessons, kind of stick with you. You get by osmosis. You get a little
Mhm.
bit here, a little bit there. When it came to denomination, it didn't matter. Uh, usually Presbyterian or Methodist, whatever church was close
Mhm.
at the time. But there were a couple things. Uh, One was that I had an early out of body experience, and I can remember, I might have been, I don't know, 8 years old, maybe,
Okay.
just walking down the street to a store with a friend and realizing that my consciousness was hovering above our bodies,
Mhm.
listening to me having a conversation.
Mm.
And that experience surprised me at first, and then it became a feeling of, well, this is normal and natural. Everybody can do this.
Mhm.
That I'm an observer of what's going on.
Mhm.
So
And
that was the first indication that I was not my body.
and for you, I guess at the time, did that feel like a spiritual experience? Because some people in the language of psychology today would call that like dissociation, or something that they would maybe be scared of. But for you, was it, did you immediately sort of code that as, oh, this is more about the you know connection or disconnection between my soul and my body, or this is something greater going on?
That.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't scary. It just felt natural.
Hmm.
Uh, and I'm sure there were other episodes of that, but that first one
Hmm.
sticks in my mind because I know where I was, what street I was walking on, what store I was going to.
Okay.
Uh,
And when you got to the store, did your soul sort of have to fly in through the door with you and then reconnect?
no, I reconnected before getting to the door.
Okay.
Okay.
Who knows what would have happened if you didn't?
Yeah. The second, I guess, major spiritual experience was probably when I was 18 years old.
Hmm.
Somebody ran me off the road, and my car went down an embankment and flipped over, and I became unconscious.
Hmm.
But was I? Because with that experience, I thought I died.
As one would.
I accepted death. And from that point on, I was no longer afraid of death.
Hmm.
And that is such a freeing experience because I think that's one of the major fears we have as humans
Hmm.
is that we're all going to die.
Hmm.
You just don't know when.
Hmm.
And I had already died. And I thought, oh, well, this is easy. And I just had a sense of peace. And when somebody's asked me about this before, I had to say, I hate to disappoint you, but I really can't tell you that I had a near-death experience where I can tell you what goes on after you die.
Yeah.
But just that feeling and that acceptance and the calm with which I was able to go into that experience just said, oh, there's nothing to this.
Yeah. At that time, did you sort of already have a belief in your mind about what happens after you die?
Well, I guess again that osmosis from Edgar Casey in
Mm-hmm.
terms of reincarnation, there may have been some of that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I have to say I didn't focus on it a whole lot.
Okay. So
Uh,
yeah, because part of me always wonders, when people have these near-death experiences that are very closely tied to a sort of experience of the afterlife or a brief, oh, I stepped up to the pearly gates, or
yeah,
I was floating in a void, or these things that seem to sort of already align with their the beliefs that they have about the afterlife. I always wonder, sort of, do you get the one you believe in? There's is there some confirmation bias going on there, or is it something more, a larger spiritual grab bag of afterlives?
yeah. Well, it is very true that uh, our beliefs are the lens with which we view the world.
Mm-hmm.
So what you see isn't what you believe. It's like when we talk about seeing is believing, well, really believing is seeing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I
You
think we
know.
see that a lot in the non-spiritual sense of,
Oh yeah.
how, especially in an increasingly polarized world, people seem to be living, completely, uh, not even parallel lives anymore, but completely
Yeah.
diverging lives, even if they're just right down the street from each other. So,
And it just has to do with belief systems.
mm-hmm.
But I'm a firm believer
So it becomes true then.
in the fact that there's nothing right or wrong about that. There just is.
Mm-hmm.
So life is an experience. Choices, there aren't right or wrong choices. They're just choices that lead to experiences.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And those experiences become your path. So,
Well said.
but it's really the basis for this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
It's the whole idea of everyone is on a different path, a very unique path to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think it's helpful to hear about as many paths as possible, so that you can take from those learnings what fits for you, what
Mm-hmm.
resonates with you. And therefore, maybe alter your path a little bit. Say, oh, that resonates with me. I think that's true. That could be true for me too.
Mm-hmm.
So,
It sounds like by the time you were 18, you already had sort of a developed spiritual life, or a belief, a strong belief in your soul and your spirit and its connection to the world and to your body. Is that true?
uh, there. I guess we make decisions based on our best knowledge at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and I would say that I was partially along on my journey. There were some things that were not very spiritual about me.
Mm-hmm.
That
You want to get into those?
well, for instance, forgiveness is a critical piece
Mm-hmm.
of a spiritual journey, and learning what that concept is all about.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of trouble with my father, uh, not only in terms of trying to earn his approval, although to his credit, he never really showed disapproval
Mm-hmm.
very often. Uh, but because my brother was the firstborn,
Mm.
I was always a little jealous of my brother, and my father always seemed to favor him.
Mm.
Uh, and then there were, well, since we were talking about my childhood, and I left out the whole orphanage thing.
I wasn't going to bring it up if you weren't, but here we go.
All right. As a young child, say when I was about 2 or 3, my father had my mother committed to a mental institution. And to his credit, it was because he had put my sister in mortal danger.
He had or she had?
Or she had.
She had.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's
For the record.
get those right. Yeah. And it seemed very intentional. Like my sister was laid out on the driveway and she was going to back a car over.
Mm.
So, and he couldn't deal with that.
I mean, it's not something most people have to deal with.
No. And at the time, the state of the art in psychology did not recognize postpartum depression. And now, they would just say it was postpartum depression, and here's how we treat that.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, she was committed to a mental institution. She was given a lobotomy, and that's, again, the state of the art at that time.
Right.
Somebody's got a mental problem, you just cut out that part of the brain. And it was happening all the time. And that was where he met my stepmother, because she had a husband who she had to have committed to that same mental institution. Mm-hmm. And they bonded over that situation, and both being single parents with children, and
there's a rom-com in there somewhere.
That sort of thing. Yeah. So when they decided to get together and move away from New York, where this happened, and come to Pittsburgh, they put her 2 children and his 3 children, all of us, in an orphanage, except my sister. She was too young for the orphanage, and she went into a foster home. That first orphanage they put us in was closed down due to child abuse.
Oh.
So they put us in a second orphanage the next year. And what this did, in a negative way, one might say, is give you the sense that family doesn't matter. If you can be given away, mm-hmm. or just put somewhere else away from the family for a period of time.
Yeah, like an object, not a person.
Yeah, then you don't have that strong family bond. Mm-hmm. But that can also be seen as a positive.
If you believe it.
Because growing up, deciding that, okay, family isn't about who you're born into or what collective you're born into. Family is much broader than that, and much larger than that. So you grow up without a feeling of security around family, but little by little, in my case anyway, mm-hmm. what became family was very different.
And I maybe know the answer to this, but at the time, were you thinking about it that way, or?
Oh, no. No. I really never forgave my father for that as a child, or even into my 20s and 30s and 40s.
Hmm.
But at some point, I just thought, you know, he was doing the best he could with what he knew at the time. And he knew that in order to be able to support his family, he had to put us in those orphanages until he could get enough money together. And the same thing with my stepmother, that she could work and he could work full time,
Hmm.
and they could pool their funds and then bring the family together in a stable relationship.
Mm.
So once I got to the point where I could say, geez, he was just doing the best he could with what he knew.
Hmm.
And that was that. And I was able to forgive him. And once I forgave him, I developed a pretty good relationship with him, like the 10 years before he passed. So,
And that is a great outcome of that forgiveness. What do you feel that being able to forgive did for you spiritually? Like, was that sort of a step up in your development, or?
yeah, frankly, it was all about me. It had nothing to do with him because being able to forgive releases anger.
Mhm.
It releases anxiety. It releases hatred. And when you can release those things and no longer hold them in your heart, then there's so much more room in your heart for love.
Mm.
So, yeah, to me, forgiveness is never about the other person.
Mhm. Well, I mean, you could say sort of the same of the other side of that coin. Often the grudges we hold are never really about the other person either.
Well, true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to be mindful of time here, so I want to move us
Okay.
forward.
Right.
Not to, downplay the importance of everything we've just talked about, but I want to sort of push us to
Okay.
the post 18 life. So could you talk about your time in the Army, sort of from, I guess, through a lens of where were you spiritually when you enlisted versus where were you when you got out, and what was the development like while you were in?
Yeah, this is, thank you for that question.
I realize it's a
Because,
big question.
well, because this was the time of the Vietnam War
Hmm.
and the time of high racial tension.
Hmm.
So there was a combination of those things, and I'll actually talk about the racial tension first
Hmm.
because I was working at the University of Pittsburgh while I was going to school there for my undergraduate degree, and I was working in the snack bar, and there were two young students working with me, and they were both black, and there was a march coming up from the Hill District, going right past the university, right past the windows. We could see the marchers.
Hmm.
And they were about to clash with the National Guard.
Hmm.
And this was all about the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr.
Hmm.
So I had gone somewhere to get some supplies for the snack bar where we were working. And as I got back, I overheard a conversation between these two black fellows. And one of them saying, let's get Whitey. Let's beat up our boss here because we're just tired of this. And the other fellow said to him, why would we do that? He's been very nice to us. I have no problem with him as a person. And the other guy said, yeah, but this is bigger than just a person. This is making a statement. And the other fellow just talked him down from that and defended me. And it immediately, not that I ever felt racist at any time, but that one conversation, and these guys would probably never remember that conversation, but
Sure.
for me, it was a seminal moment in just being able to say, everybody's an individual, everybody's different. Never paint broad brush strokes about any group of people, not just racially, but in any way, even gender-wise, or from different countries. Everybody is on their own path. Everybody is different.
Yeah.
They're all individuals.
And I imagine something like that makes you much more cognizant of sort of the flip side of that, which is, I'm moving through the world, maybe seeing myself as just a person, but other people are looking at me in categories and thinking about, how my behaviors play into the sort of baggage of the category that I fit into, and maybe how, even if I seem nice, maybe, I hold some of those same beliefs. And once you realize that people are thinking that about you, you can in some ways realize the ways you didn't realize you were thinking that about other people, and sort of hope that, as they would let that go about you, you would also let go of that false narrative about them.
Right. It's a way of looking at people just for who they are. And sometimes the critical thing is to look at them as who they are right now, not who they used to be, or not who you think they should become,
or who you want them to be,
but just who they are right now. And to be able to, I guess, sit across from people and have conversations and be in the moment with them is such a gift to that other person.
Yeah.
And if you do that for them, you're more than likely able to get that reciprocated. So it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, getting back to the war.
So anyway, the war.
So that I had a friend offered to shoot my toe off because he knew that if I was missing a toe, I wouldn't be drafted. And when I was in undergraduate school, at that point you had a deferment if you were in college. But as soon as you graduated, that deferment expired. And even though I applied to graduate school, they stopped giving graduate school deferments.
And you didn't think about failing a few classes just to have to repeat a year?
No, it was struggle enough getting through. So what I decided to do, rather than move to Canada, which some friends did, or shoot off my toe, which was suggested to me, I volunteered for the draft. Now that may sound strange, but
sort of the opposite effect of what you were going for.
Well, if you wait for your number to come up with the draft, you have no control over what's going on. If you have your draft number and you have an idea that, yep, I'm going to get called up eventually, graduate school won't accept me because they want to keep those slots for people they know who won't be drafted.
Okay.
So you just go down the draft board and say, take me, I'm yours. So
it was more of a removing the uncertainty.
Yeah. Now, my sense of making that commitment, thinking that I could never kill anybody, knowingly, on purpose, intentionally,
Mm-hmm.
but also having a sense of duty to say, yes, I should do my part for my country.
Mm-hmm.
But getting drafted doesn't mean you're going to go to Vietnam. It's highly likely at that
Mm-hmm.
stage of the game, but not necessarily the case. So, where I would draw the line is not, no, I'm not going to serve my country, but no, you're not going to send me into a war.
Mm.
So, I just thought, okay, if the universe is with me, I won't end up going to Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
If not, I'll make the decision at the point that the decision must be made.
Okay.
So that was my spiritual process, my thought process in going into this.
Which is interesting because, you know, the enlisting or the sort of going down to the draft board yourself as opposed to waiting for your number to come up is kind of a taking back of control. But in this process, it's almost a releasing of control of, you
Right.
know, all right, if you, where you lead, I will follow, except
Yeah.
over there. But
Yeah. And it ended up great.
Hmm.
I had a terrific experience in the Army.
Hmm.
And because I got sent to Korea, which was considered a battle zone
Mm-hmm.
because there was never a full peace agreement between North and South Korea.
Okay.
So if you were sent to Korea, you would not be sent to Vietnam.
Mm. Because you were necessary there.
Yeah. And what they had done was lined us up and pretty much said, okay, you go to Korea, you go to Germany, you go to Vietnam. You go to Korea, you go to Germany, you go to Vietnam. So it was a real
Talk about the
crapshoot.
universe. Yeah.
And I had always been interested in the Far East. Had always wanted to go to China. Korea was the next best thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't on my dime. Uncle Sam paid my way.
Yeah.
I was able to do a couple what I felt were pretty important things while I was there. I got a group of soldiers from the Army together to go out and help. And this sounds a little strange, but help with a missionary who had an establishment where she was rehabilitating prostitutes.
Hmm.
So there was a lot of prostitution around the Army base,
Hmm.
as there is all over the world
Right.
with Army bases. And her name was Susie Younger. She actually had a published book out. I recently got a hold of that book just a couple years ago. I was able to find it and ordered it as a used book. But we helped in the repairs of the building where she taught them sewing and other skills so that they could make a living other than through prostitution.
A little workforce development.
Yeah. So that was one thing. The other thing is I helped establish an underground newspaper on the base.
Mm-hmm.
And we interviewed the general in charge of the base in our first issue. So it looked like we were legitimate.
Don't worry, guys. This is very pro-war.
But we published poetry and essays that people were writing, and used it as an outlet for people on the base.
Mm-hmm.
And it got a circulation that went to other bases in Korea. And I met made some good friends doing that. So anyway, those were two of the things that uh, that I was able to do while we were there that felt really good.
Hmm. So maybe this is a big question, but did you have to do anything while you were there that conflicted with your spiritual beliefs? Did you ever come up against sort of a spiritual dilemma while you were in Korea?
Not really. There was a spiritual disappointment
Mm.
in that I thought, oh, great, I'm going to Korea. I'll get to be in a land where there are a lot of Buddhists
Mm.
and learn a lot about Buddhism
Hmm.
firsthand. This will be really cool.
I would have assumed the same thing.
And I got there, and 90% of the country is Catholic. Uh,
Yep.
and there are Buddhists in Korea, don't get me wrong,
Mhm.
but pretty much every Buddhist monastery is in the center of a national park.
Mm.
I mean,
Right.
there are parks around these
They need a lot of peace and quiet.
Buddhist enclaves. Yeah. So that was a little bit of a shock
Hmm.
and a disappointment. But
Yeah. Well, it's another one
Yeah.
for colonialism, I
Yeah.
guess. Okay, so moving right along, we'll yeet right out of Korea,
okay.
and I want to talk about relationships, and this could eat up easily hours of our time. So I'm going to ask us to both try to rein it in here a little bit. But
Okay.
you have been married now 4 times. This
Yeah.
last one has really stuck, and I'm grateful for that. But that covers a span of many, many years, decades. And so I was wondering, where did your sort of spiritual life intersect with these different marriages, and how did each of those experiences sort of move you forward on your journey?
Yeah.
Again, huge question. So
Yeah. All right. Coming from a family where I did not experience a lot of love,
hmm
and because of the orphanage experience, uh, didn't quite know what love was. And I guess most people growing up is, it's something you have to learn,
hmm
unless you experience it throughout your life, then that's different. But
hmm
uh, so I guess looking for love in all the wrong places, or
hmm
or just trying to find out, well, gee, this feels good. Maybe this is love because it really feels good.
Yeah.
Uh, so that first marriage was, and if you can picture in your mind, the hippie generation,
hmm
and because this was the 60s, uh, it was what would be defined at that time as an open marriage, because I saw marriages failing all around me,
hmm
and felt that marriage is probably not going to be a lifelong commitment, even though when you say your vows, typically you're saying,
Right.
yeah, this is kind of forever until it's not.
Yeah. But when everybody says it and it only
Yeah.
happens, a percentage of the time, it's harder to believe.
But actually, our wedding vows just pretty much said this is going to be for as long as it lasts, whatever that might be. And it didn't last real long. And I really won't go into why that was, other than the person I was married to ended up becoming a Hare Krishna.
Mm.
So that was the first one. The second one was pretty much on a rebound from that,
hmm
and feeling that at that stage and spiritually, just feeling that I could love everyone
Mm.
in this world equally. So love doesn't have to be the deciding factor on who I marry,
Mm-hmm.
because I love everybody.
Right.
So what's the deciding factor? Well, at that point, I felt somebody who loves me.
Mm. Of course. The best way to pick them.
Yeah, and it expresses that to me. So that person popped up into my life, and I thought, okay, this feels good. This person loves me. Uh, I love her as much as I love everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So why not? And that ended up. The first marriage was out in Shenley Park, out in the park under the open skies.
Mm-hmm. Hippies again.
The hippies, yeah. The second one was total opposite in a Catholic church,
Ah.
and her brother was a Catholic priest,
So this was a real officiant.
and her sister, had wanted to become a nun.
Mm.
So this was pretty solid. That marriage lasted about 9 months, maybe a year. I don't recall. But it came down to decisions where she really loved her mother more than than she loved me, and couldn't find her way to actually leave the nest totally. But it's not just on her; it's on me.
Mm-hmm.
When I kind of had a feeling like, what have I done?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really in love with this person.
Mm-hmm. So that sort of implies that you had come to a slightly different understanding of love through that relationship,
Yeah.
which I suppose it was an important lesson.
Well, it evolves as we evolve.
Mm-hmm.
So the third marriage was based on being needed by somebody who already had a child and was trying to raise this child on her own. And I felt needed to the point where I could really help in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
But the love thing still hadn't been worked out totally.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I stuck with that person until her 9-year-old daughter graduated from high school.
Oh, wow.
Because I felt that the need was as much for the daughter as it was for the woman. So having made those mistakes, and I actually went into therapy after this, after the second marriage.
An important spiritual process, going to therapy. Highly recommend it.
And for some reason, I let the third wife convince me to drop therapy.
Mm.
And that could have been a mistake. Anyway, so I never had any children with those first three marriages.
Which was the first thing I asked when I found out about this.
Yeah.
Do I have any secret siblings? No. Unfortunate.
You have to relate how you found out about this.
Oh, gosh. It was, I think I was in 4th grade. And all this fancy new technology. We have these computer labs in school. And so we were doing a family genealogy project in, homeroom or social studies or whatever it was. So they, cart us all over to the computer lab, and we sit down at our big boxy desktops, And they put us on Ancestry.com, and they said, all right, you're going to start just by sort of putting in your mother's name, putting in your father's name, and, you can start building your family tree from there to go back. And so I put in mom's name, and, she came up, and then you came up, spouse. Oh, okay, write it down. And then I put in your name, and your name came up, and 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like, that's not the same answer. So I went home at the end of the day, and I was like, hey, do I have, other moms? Just a question. And then, of course, you sat me and my sister down on the couch, and I remember, we had the fire going in the fireplace, and you explained, and both of us, I think, were like, oh, do we have, brothers and sisters? We were all excited, and you were like, no. So
Yeah.
that was, the wonders of the internet. Yeah. All the secrets come out.
Well, I remember your question. Why haven't you told me this before? Why did you keep it a secret? And I just said, you never asked.
Yeah. Well, and, I think about it now, and it's like, when is the right time to just self-generate that one? And I still don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I forgive you for not telling me.
Well, I'm glad you made yourself feel better.
Yeah, it's not a big one.
I'm forgiving me. Anyway, so when I was in college, I mentioned that I had dated someone who was into Edgar Cayce and had gone to study group meetings. And at one of these meetings, they did Carillion photography, which basically, and in this case, they just did it on people's hands. And it showed the energy that comes from your hands.
Like aura photography?
Yeah, pretty much.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I was told that I had a lot of energy coming out of my palms and my fingertips, more than most people. So I just cataloged that away because eventually I end up learning Reiki. And I just this past week passed my Reiki 2 level.
Oh, congratulations.
So I'm now a Reiki 2 practitioner. Anyway, that stuck with me. The woman at the time that I was dating, when I went to Korea, she sent me what's known as a Dear John letter. Even though I'm not John, I got one of those letters that many of my friends got too. And that was kind of a bummer, but that's life.
Yeah.
So the Cayce thing, we ended up, as you know, taking some vacations to Virginia Beach. Virginia Beach is where the Edgar Cayce headquarters are.
I spent many an hour wandering through the bamboo forest behind the ARE.
Right, the Association for Research and Enlightenment. So I kind of reconnected with the Cayce roots there and introduced your mother to Cayce concepts and what that was about. And at our church, which is Waverly Presbyterian, and people who have listened to these podcasts have heard about Waverly in the past. During a Sunday school class, we just mentioned anybody interested in Edgar Cayce and forming a group to talk about Edgar Cayce's work. Well, there were a few people who were interested in that topic. And we ended up forming an Edgar Cayce study group, which then migrated to someone's home. In fact, that someone's home, eventually how things all worked out is that the husband of that person is your godfather. So anyway, it's a small world.
Small world.
Anyway, so for 5 years, we had an Edgar Cayce study group, and then took 5 years off from that And then I established another Edgar Casey study group because a friend of mine had, from the church, had been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And I guess I took it upon myself to sense that he needed more of a spiritual background. Not that he wasn't spiritual, he was very spiritual, but spiritual in a church denomination way.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to introduce him to some other options around thoughts about life and death and reincarnation, and what this mystery was all about. So I started another Edgar Casey study group that met at Waverly. And that went on for another 5 years until your mother and I went to Rwanda.
So, in the interest of time, I sort of want to move us toward a conclusion here with a question that is now going to span, 30 years.
Yeah, and we have 2 minutes.
We have 2 minutes because I guess, obviously, now in your life, you are part of a lot of different spiritual groups, and, you have this podcast. There's sort of a spirit of seeking in your life and constantly pushing towards spiritual growth. Where you are now, what do you think sort of motivates that drive, that constant engagement with spirituality and constant sort of pushing forward on your journey? What's driving you there?
Well, in some ways, I don't feel driven.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, it's just saying that my spiritual life is pretty much all that's important.
Mm-hmm.
But but it encompasses everything. It encompasses you and your sister and your mother, and but then a much broader family of people, because we do have 2 spiritual groups that meet online.
Mm-hmm.
I belong to Now Creations, and people who listen to these podcasts, got a lot of information about Now Creations.
Mm-hmm.
And what I like about Now Creations, because of the spiritual meetings that I attend there, as well as spiritual meetings that I run, is a constant reminder that this is what's important. That it's your soul and your soul spirit and your connection to God, and nothing else really matters.
Mm-hmm. So
that's the lens. That's my belief, and that's the lens that I look at life through.
Okay. Okay.
So we better.
I believe we have reached our time here. So I guess thank you to everyone who was listening and watching on YouTube. It's been a great conversation.
Okay. There's one thing you're supposed to ask me now.
Okay.
What words of wisdom do I want to leave the audience with?
Well, Dr. Bob, what words of wisdom would you like to leave the audience with?
I think what I just said, that the most important thing in your life is your connection to the God Spirit. And if you keep that in mind and you view everything around you through the eyes of God, and you may say, well, how can I possibly see through the eyes of God? Well, God lives here in your heart. So before you make a decision, before you make a judgment, the eyes of God say, 1, don't judge. Don't judge others. Don't even judge yourself. But go to your heart and look through your heart at whatever person you're looking at, whatever decision you're trying to make, whatever situation, whatever politician you're looking at. Look through your heart and then love what is, whatever is, love it. Because it is for a reason and for a purpose. And typically that purpose is for your highest good. So that's it. That's my words of wisdom.
They were very wise.
Okay. Thank you for this opportunity.
Of course. Happy to do it.
Okay. Until next time, this has been your spiritual journey.